Well, the DA spokesperson on international relations and cooperation, Ryan Smith, has raised issues about DIRCO's financial regression and asset management collapse. And I have to say, before we start this interview with Ryan Smith, that I've also been receiving in London reports of disrepair at South Africa House. I've seen text messages of people complaining about a urine smell, but this is actually not only an issue at South Africa House in London, but other embassies. So welcome, Ryan Smith. I'm so glad you're raising this issue because I've been hearing about it for a while. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Linda. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so tell us, what exactly are you raising at the moment?
Well, look, there've been a lot of rumors about the state of South Africa's embassies in terms of the structures and the buildings themselves. A lot of South Africans have said that the state of the buildings themselves are not in a very good shape, that they're not being properly maintained. And, South Africa is quite lucky. If you look at the property portfolio that we have in terms of our foreign service, we have prime locations. So if you go to the High Commission in London, for example, it's in Trafalgar Square, which is a very desirable and very sort of cosmopolitan part of the city. And so you would expect those buildings to be properly maintained and to look a certain way. And that goes for many of our sort of embassy buildings around the world. But now it's actually come to light where we had what's at Parliament we call the BRRR, which is essentially a financial report of the financial status of a particular department. And we had DIRCOs come last week to the committee. And for the first time, the department has actually regressed. So they went from receiving an unqualified audit to a qualified audit with findings. And what the AG is actually pointing to is a problem with asset management. And that refers specifically to buildings and the sort of immovable assets that fall beneath DIRCO. So there's definitely a problem in terms of the way in which these buildings are being managed financially. That doesn't necessarily point towards corruption per se. There could be some sort of slight maladministration. We know that there are fluctuations between exchange rates, for example, with the currency that can reflect in the AG's reports. But certainly based on the rumors and the feedback that we're getting from South Africans living in these foreign capitals, we're starting to wonder now and actually ask questions about the states of these particular buildings. And it was reported, I think, in Rapport newspaper about 3 weeks ago, that the Dutch citizens in the Hague have actually reported our building for the Hague's embassy to the local municipal authorities because it's got so many broken windows and the grounds are not being properly maintained. So there's definitely some truth to what's coming out of the committee, and we want to get to the bottom of what's actually happening at the department.
Well, if I can just look at South Africa House, at the moment, the consular services aren't even in South Africa House. They're renting a building just up the street. And it makes you wonder, why? Is it that because South Africa House is not in such a good condition? And I've also learned that the second in command at the embassy, that the house that they have very close to Lord's, that is also problems with its roof. So, what's going on here? Why this sense of collapse? Because even if you walk past South Africa House, because I can just zoom in on that because I'm in London, and I've also heard the rumors of other city. What's going on? Is it not enough money? Who's to blame?
So what's interesting to note is that the management and the maintenance of South Africa's foreign assets, which is the buildings that house the embassies, the residences where the ambassadors would reside or stay when they posted on diplomatic missions, those all used to fall under the Department of Public Works until quite recently. So that mandate was transferred to DIRCO because Public Works essentially said, look, we've got enough on our plates within South Africa's borders. We can't now be expected to maintain all of the buildings, outside of South Africa that our embassies use. And so that mandate was moved over to DIRCO. I'm not sure exactly when, but a couple of years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. What I asked the department last week is, it's one thing to move the mandates, but was that accompanied with the appropriate budgets? And was it accompanied with the appropriate expertise and skill set? Because you need people who understand real estate and who can manage property portfolios within DIRCO. And the response shocked me because DIRCO said, no, we were given the mandate, but we weren't provided with the budgets or the program that housed that particular skill set from Public Works. So that's problem number one. The second issue is that now in this absence of money and skills, who is responsible for maintaining these buildings? Is it all managed centrally from DIRCO in Pretoria, or is it decentralized? Does it become the responsibility of the head of mission who, maintains our presence on behalf of the ambassador in that particular country? Is it a combination of both? So we need to understand now how this has not been properly fleshed out by the department, because these buildings, it's DIRCO is an outward facing department. It's the face of our country abroad. If those buildings are in a state of disrepair, what does it say about South Africa? And, looking at a building with broken windows and overgrown lawns, it's a perfect metaphor of the state of our governments under the ANC, I would say. So it's just interesting to look at it in that light. But the final problem, I'll say, is there's a lack of consequence management among diplomats themselves. So what we've seen is, and this is actually what the AG's report told us in the BRRR in our committee last week, is that many of the buildings that we own that are meant for ambassadors and our foreign service to reside in are actually so badly dilapidated that they're uninhabitable. You can't actually live in them. And so the department now has to fork out more money to rent properties overseas to house these foreign officials and ambassadors. And then the cherry on top, which really, makes me very angry, is that you've got certain diplomats or diplomatic officials who vandalize the rented properties, and the fees or the costs that are incurred as a result of that are paid for by DIRCO, which is taxpayers' money. And we had a particular case where I actually asked the minister to fire an official who had vandalized properties in Austria and India where he was posted. And instead of facing some consequences, he was redeployed to Jordan, where he serves as the political counselor. So you see these diplomatic officials just getting away with murder and doing as they please. And there's no sense of consequence management and accountability for the rank mismanagement as a consequence of the failure of this department to actually maintain these properties.
Well, something that you mentioned in your statement and that I've also heard is that artifacts are going missing and pieces of art are going missing out of this building. I've actually had somebody who told me that they knew of an art dealer who was sort of dealing in the underworld, who actually saw one of the paintings. Okay, I'm not talking about the Birnievs because they are frescoes. They can't be removed from South Africa House, but it was for sale on a private sale in auction, and it was sold on auction. But this wasn't recently. But are you worried about artifacts and art going missing out of these embassies?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, it's difficult to verify the rumors and the hearsay that you get, because it's we still are sitting in a committee here in Cape Town, and we get very little opportunity to visit these embassies and do the travel that costs Parliament a lot of money for our committee to conduct that oversight. But what we do in the DA is, if we happen to be in a particular country for whatever reason, we will do an unannounced oversight visit. So I will take my parliamentary tag with me, pitch up at the embassy. That by law is South African property, and I'm entitled to go into that building, go into the bathrooms, open the taps, see if there's water, switch on the lights, and just generally check the state of the building. So we will be embarking on a lot more of those visits, I think, going forward. But in the absence of that, it's difficult to verify the reports that we get of items going missing. It could be true, it could not be true. Some of them could have been removed to be restored. They could be in storage somewhere in the embassy. But the problem is that when we ask DIRCO about this, and I've submitted a batch of questions to actually find out where these things are, is that there should be an audit really of all of the, we've just spoken about the immovable assets. We need to have an audit of the movable assets as well. So what outside of just the structure belongs to South Africa inside that particular foreign mission? And many of those artifacts and artworks are priceless pieces that were gifted to South Africa as a sign of goodwill from either the host country or from other nations, that quite frankly, they belong to the state. They belong actually to the people of South Africa. It's just preposterous actually to think that an ambassador who is supposed to be representing us with prestige could either personally be implicated in the sort of disappearance of these artifacts, or could be presiding over a foreign mission that is not keeping checks and balances over these particular artifacts. So there are a lot of questions, but we are we asking the necessary questions to the minister and to the department to find out what's happening, because we're getting more and more reports of this happening in capitals, not just in London, but The Hague I've mentioned, certain foreign missions in other parts of the world. And it's really, aside from being a problem of oversight and accountability, it's an embarrassment. We don't want other countries to look at our embassies and see them as, buildings falling apart, or buildings where people are stealing paintings and artifacts. So it's really a blight on our international image, and it's something that we take very seriously in the DA.
Well, if we can't manage those properties or have enough money to manage them, shouldn't we have less missions?
Well, we certainly think that it's worth downscaling the sort of amounts of South Africa's foreign missions. We have one of the largest foreign missions out of many states in the world. If I'm not mistaken, I think the second largest in the world. Now, you ask yourself, why would South Africa, as a developing nation that can barely afford to pay for teachers and nurses and basic services back home, be sending diplomats to countries where we don't have much trade and investment, have very little tourism sort of prospects? It really does seem as if the Foreign Service has been used as a paid holiday for retired politicians or people who just have nothing better to do. So we need to, I think, look at our embassies a lot more strategically. We must have very, very well-staffed strategic missions with our largest trading partners. So we need to take capitals like Washington, D.C., Brussels in Belgium, London, Beijing in China, and certainly if you look at Africa, the AU's headquarters in Addis Ababa, and other larger trading partners in South America, Southeast Asia, etc., Japan, South Korea. These are key countries that we rely on for trade. So that's where you should be placing the emphasis on your foreign service and your embassies. But, if we look at countries like, I'm trying to think of some obscure examples, but, Georgia or Armenia, I'm not sure if we actually have ambassadors there, but there are some very obscure countries where we've had an embassy for ages and ages. And you think to yourself, why? We can rather have a regional embassy that can serve 4 or 5 countries at the same time, and rather spend the money that would have gone to an additional embassy in those particular countries elsewhere. So we do, I think, need to re-strategize, I think, that our international presence, to make it more qualitative instead of quantitative, to bring value to South Africa.
Well, we'll watch this. Thank you so much, Ryan Smith.
Thank you.